They don't need to chain your hands if they already have a grip on your heart. They don't need to lock a door if they've built a prison inside your mind. And too many of us are walking free, but living bound. They didn't ask your permission when they installed those emotional buttons. They just placed them in you when you were too young, too vulnerable, too unaware to protect yourself. They arrived through the absence of affection, the sting of criticism, the comparisons that told you you weren't enough. Maybe it was a parent who withheld love when you failed. Maybe it was a teacher who laughed when you spoke. Maybe it was someone who should have protected your spirit but instead fractured it. These moments didn't just pass through you, they stayed, they rooted, and from them grew buttons that others later discovered. Some found them by accident, some searched deliberately, but what matters is that they exist. And when someone wants power over you, they don't need force. They just need to know which button makes you explode, which button makes you retreat, which one makes you beg. And the moment they figure it out, they don't have to fight for control, they already have it. They'll poke at your insecurities when they want obedience. They'll guilt you when they want access. They'll use your fear of abandonment to get a reaction. And the tragedy is, it works. Because when someone can predict your reaction, they can program your behavior. Every button is a script. You cry here, you rage there, you shut down over there. You think you're making choices, but you're really just reacting to their control. And if you're not careful, your life becomes a loop. A cycle of being triggered, responding, regretting, then doing it all over again. You apologize for your reaction, but not once do they apologize for the button they pushed. Because it's easier for the world to label you emotional or insensitive, too much, than to admit that they're toying with parts of you that were never meant to be played with. But here's where everything begins to change. When you stop trying to remove the button and instead learn to unplug it. See, healing isn't always about erasing the pain. It's about rewiring your response to it. You may never forget what was said to you. You may never completely forget what was done. But you can remember without being ruled. You can recall without being rattled. This is your invitation to meet your triggers with compassion, not shame. To look them in the face and say, I know where you came from, but you don't get to own me anymore. That's the real revolution, when the same button gets pressed, but the explosion never comes. When they expect you to break and you rise. When they try to access your old wound and find a scar instead. Some will resent your healing because their control depended on your confusion. And now that you're learning, now that you're watching instead of reacting, now that you're responding with clarity and not chaos, they feel powerless. They'll say you've changed, that you've grown cold, that you're distant, but you haven't grown cold. You've grown conscious. You've learned that not everyone deserves access to your unguarded self. And don't be surprised if the world tests you after you start unplugging those buttons. Old relationships will press harder. New ones will test softly. The universe has a way of making sure the lesson was not just heard, but lived. You will feel the old urges to snap, to defend, to explain, to justify. But pause, breathe, reconnect with your intention. Every time you choose presence over reaction, you unplug that button a little more. This isn't about becoming numb. You're not building a wall, you're building a boundary. You're not suppressing your emotion, you're stewarding it, and that's powerful. Because when you can feel deeply but respond wisely, you become untouchable in a world addicted to chaos. No one taught us how to regulate our emotions. We were taught to behave, to obey, to look okay. But now you get to teach yourself. Now you get to reparent the parts of you that were trained to panic. You get to tell your inner child, you're safe now. We don't have to react like that anymore. We know better. We are better. This is the work that's unseen. This is the war that's quiet. But this is the victory that matters. Because if you don't do it, someone will always be able to come into your life and push that same button and watch you dance the same dance, over and over. But when you do the work, when you unplug the pattern, the dance ends, the music stops, the control is broken. That's the real freedom, not in controlling the world, but in making sure the world doesn't control you, not in never feeling, but in never being owned by the feeling. That is what power looks like. That is what healing sounds like. It's not loud, it's not public, but it's real, and it's yours. The world will try to pull a reaction out of you like a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat. They'll press, they'll provoke, they'll whisper your name in wrong rooms just to see if you'll rise, defend, explode. People throw shade not always because they believe it, but because they want to watch your light flicker. They want to show. And every time you respond on cue, you become the actor in a drama they wrote and directed. But wisdom will teach you this: not every performance deserves your presence. Not every invitation deserves an RSVP. And most importantly, not every attack requires your energy. Because if you give a response to everything, you leave nothing for yourself. You spend your day handing out pieces of peace to people who didn't earn it and don't value it. And at the end of it all, you're drained. Not because you fought battles, but because you answered every knock at your emotional door. We were taught early that silence is weakness. That if you don't defend yourself, you must be guilty. That if you don't clap back, you must be soft. But silence is one of the most underrated strengths you can ever carry. Silence doesn't mean surrender, it means selection. It means knowing the value of your voice so deeply that you refuse to waste it on nonsense. Let them wonder what you're thinking. Let them choke on their own assumptions. Because silence does something words never can. It makes the room echo with your absence. And when someone can no longer provoke a reaction from you, they are forced to sit with their own noise. They don't get to dance with your rage. They don't get to manipulate your mood. Your silence becomes the mirror they were never ready to face. The real power in silence is not just what it withholds, but what it protects. Your peace, your clarity, your ability to stay aligned with your higher self when the world wants you to descend into chaos. When someone insults you, it's not always because they see the truth in you. It's often because they see their own discomfort reflected back. And if you choose to react to everything, you become their mirror, not your own master. Sometimes silence is not passive. It is a declaration, a boundary, a strategy. It says, I know who I am and I don't need your approval to confirm it. It says, you can throw the stone, but I won't bleed for you. It says, I see the trap and I choose not to step into it. There is no loss in letting someone think they've won if what you're protecting is your peace. They call you cold. They say you're distant. They claim you've changed. And in truth, you have. You've evolved from the person who needed to be understood in every room to the one who understands herself enough to walk away. You've grown past the urge to argue. You've matured beyond the need to explain. You've learned that silence can't be twisted. Silence can't be weaponized against you. Silence is yours, and it is sacred. Let them spin their narratives. Let them speak your name in rooms you've outgrown. If they lie, truth will live longer. If they slander, your fruit will speak for you. Because you don't have to react to prove you're right. You don't have to explain to validate your worth. Your life, your presence, your quiet commitment to growth, that will be your loudest answer. And sometimes silence is not for them, it's for you. It's for your own healing. Because reaction is energy, and energy is a resource. You can't afford to give it away recklessly. You can't keep allowing small minds to rent space in your large spirit. You can't continue to answer every opinion as if it's fact. The more you evolve, the more you'll realize that peace is not just a feeling, it's a discipline. And silence is one of its sharpest tools. It's not easy. Every part of your ego will scream, say something. Every memory of betrayal will demand that you lash out. Every insecurity will beg you to prove yourself. But this is your opportunity to rise above the noise. Not to escape from the world, but to engage with it on your terms. on your timing, with your integrity intact. There is no shame in silence. There is strength. Stillness is not surrender. It is selection. You are choosing not to let the outside world dictate your inner climate. You are choosing not to let chaos become your currency. You are choosing to be the thermostat, not the thermometer. And that kind of composure can only come from someone who has met themselves deeply and decided to stay rooted. So when they come for you, when the shade gets thrown, the rumors circulate, the tension builds, pause, take a breath, and remember, not everything deserves your reaction. Not every attack deserves your presence. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. When they can't win the argument with facts, they turn up the volume on your feelings. They abandon reason and reach for manipulation. Because logic has limits. It needs clarity, evidence, truth. But emotion? Emotion can be bent. It can be weaponized. And when you don't see it coming, it can be used to control you before you realize you've surrendered. The truth is, many people don't want an honest conversation. They want compliance. They don't care to understand you. They only care that you do what they want, think how they think, feel how they feel. And when you resist that, they reach for the most effective tool they've got, your heart. They stir your guilt, press your fear, play on your shame, and suddenly it's not about the facts anymore. It's about how they made you feel, about how they moved you from your clarity into confusion. That's how control begins, not with force, but with emotion. They'll make you feel bad for setting boundaries, make you feel cruel for saying no, make you feel selfish for choosing yourself. And if you're not rooted, you'll start questioning your decisions, not because they're wrong, but because someone made you feel like they were. That's how they win, not with truth, but with turmoil. They hijack your peace and fill the space with their need. And you, being human, being sensitive, being kind, you start shrinking just to keep them comfortable. That's why emotional manipulation is so dangerous. Because it doesn't wear a label, it doesn't scream, it whispers, it doesn't shout commands, it plants questions. Why are you being so distant? I guess I don't matter to you anymore. After everything I've done for you? These are not questions, they're traps. They're carefully wrapped guilt bombs designed to make you doubt your strength. And when logic fails to convince you to stay, to tolerate, to obey, they press on your empathy instead. If you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling drained, disoriented, or doubting your own voice, you know what emotional control feels like. It's not just what they say, it's what they make you carry. The weight of their disappointment, the fear of their silence, the threat of their withdrawal. And if you're not anchored in your worth, you'll spend your life trying to please people who are only ever satisfied when you're small enough to manage. But you are not here to be manageable. You are not here to be controlled by moods, tantrums, or emotional threats. You are here to live from truth. And truth requires distance from manipulation. It requires that you see the pattern when it plays out, that you recognize when someone is not arguing to connect, but to conquer, that you understand. Emotional chaos is the fog they use to hide their intentions. So the question becomes, how do you stop it? First, you get clear. You learn to identify the difference between a healthy emotional exchange and emotional warfare. You train yourself to feel deeply but not drown. You remind yourself, just because you feel guilty doesn't mean you are. Just because you feel afraid doesn't mean the danger is real. And just because someone is upset with your decision doesn't mean the decision is wrong. Second, you stop negotiating with feelings that aren't yours. You recognize when someone is throwing their discomfort at your feet and asking you to fix it. You see when someone is using their pain as a leash. Not every tear is honest. Not every silence is sincere. Some people cry to cleanse, others cry to confuse. And you must know the difference, Because if you don't, you'll start carrying burdens that don't belong to you. Third, you pause before reacting. The manipulator thrives on urgency. They want you off balance, off center, rushing to respond. But your power is in the pause, in the breath, in the moment between stimulus and response where your wisdom speaks. Emotional control can't survive in awareness. When you can name what's happening, you stop being a puppet. You become the observer, and the observer can choose. Last, and most importantly, you build emotional discipline. You don't numb yourself, you master yourself. You learn that not every feeling is truth. Some are echoes, some are illusions, some are old stories waiting to be rewritten. When you learn to sit with your discomfort instead of letting others sit behind the wheel of it, you take your power back. You become the gatekeeper of your emotional life. And no one gets in unless they come with respect. The truth is, emotional manipulation doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from the people closest to us, the ones who've learned what to say, when to say it, how to break us without raising their voice. And that's why emotional awareness isn't just self-help, it's self-defense. You must know yourself so well that you can't be used against yourself. Because once someone knows how to move your emotions, they can move your whole life and call it love, concern, friendship. But you deserve better than that. You deserve clarity. You deserve peace. You deserve the kind of love that respects your boundaries and doesn't weaponize your feelings. So be wise, be watchful. And when logic exits the room and manipulation walks in, stand still, stand firm. And remember, you don't owe anyone your surrender. Not even when they cry, not even when they beg, not even when they claim it's love. Because love, real love, doesn't control, it frees. There will always be someone trying to pull you into the fire. Someone who throws shade just to see if it'll block your light. Someone who lies, twists, mocks, or pokes, not because they need to be right, but because they need to feel powerful. And the moment they see you flinch, they believe they've won. That's how the game goes. They bait you with ego, with insult, with offense, and wait for you to react like clockwork. But here's the truth you learn when you grow. Not every fight is your fight. Not every battle deserves your sword. Not every disagreement requires your presence. Some people are not looking for peace or resolution. They're looking for attention, drama, or a distraction from their own chaos. And if you respond to every single one, you'll spend your entire life defending yourself to people who were never listening in the first place. There is power in knowing when to walk away. There is wisdom in staying seated when the world tries to drag you onto a stage you never auditioned for. Because sometimes the battle isn't yours. It's a performance that needs an audience. And you, in your strength and growth, no longer have to buy a ticket. You can let them talk, let them spin, let them scream into the air and fight shadows. Your silence is not surrender. It is strategy. You see, when you're at peace with who you are, you stop trying to convince everyone else. You realize that most people's opinions are just projections. Their anger has nothing to do with you. Their accusations say more about their lens than your character. But when you still feel the need to answer every insult, correct every lie, or fight every attack, you're giving your peace away piece by piece. You're letting someone else set your emotional temperature, and just like that, they own the thermostat of your spirit. But you don't have to attend every argument. You don't have to explain yourself in rooms that were never meant to hold your truth. You don't have to get the last word. Maturity teaches you that walking away is not weakness. It's a sign that your energy is too expensive to waste on cheap conversations. When you know your worth, you don't argue to prove it. You live in a way that reflects it. And let's be honest, sometimes you want to fight. You want to say something back. You want to drag them with your words and show them you're not one to be played with. But ask yourself, at what cost? Your peace, your reputation, your growth, Not every situation is worthy of your reaction. Some are meant to test your discipline. Others are meant to teach you discernment, because it's easy to win the battle and lose your dignity. And sometimes silence isn't just about the other person. It's about you. It's about choosing stillness so you can hear yourself think. Choosing distance so you can protect your healing. Choosing not to engage so you don't lose yourself in a war that was never yours to begin with. That's not cowardice. That's clarity. That's knowing that peace is louder than any clapback could ever be. Let them call you fake, cold, distant. Let them call you arrogant for not entertaining every invitation to chaos. That's fine, because your life isn't built on their labels. It's built on your discipline. Your ability to say, no, I won't give my energy to that is your superpower. The battle they want you to fight will still be there tomorrow, but your peace may not be if you keep offering it to people who only want to destroy it. So breathe. Step back. Watch. Most fires burn themselves out when you stop adding fuel. Most arguments die in silence. Most attacks lose power when you refuse to respond. And the people who once thrived on your reaction will eventually choke on their own noise. Not because you shouted them down, but because your absence was louder than your words could ever be. This is how you grow. You don't rise to every bait. You don't swing at every provocation. You become selective with your energy, guarded with your peace, and intentional with your responses. And in doing so, you remind the world that your strength isn't proven in conflict, but in control. You're not here to fight every battle. You're here to win the ones that matter. People are always watching, not always with love, not always with admiration, but watching, observing, taking mental notes of what makes you flinch, what makes you fold, what makes you light up, and what causes you to crumble. They're not just seeing your smile, they're measuring how wide it is. They're not just hearing your silence, they're calculating how long it lasts. And while some watch out of curiosity, others study you for control. They want to know your patterns, your weak spots, your soft places, not to understand you, but to use you. They learn what to say to shut you down, what to bring up to shift your mood, what version of love or rejection keeps you coming back. If you're not aware of yourself, they'll use your story against you. They'll memorize your pain and repeat it like a password to unlock parts of you that should have remained private. That's why self-awareness is not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's protection. It's knowing yourself so deeply that no one can weaponize your reflection. You must study your wounds, not to stay in pain, but so no one else gets to press them without your permission. You must study your triggers, not to live on edge, but to know the difference between danger and discomfort. Because when you know why something moves you, you no longer get moved by surprise. You can't afford to walk through this world blindly hoping others will treat you kindly. Some will, but others will use the kindness you've never extended to yourself. They will play with your empathy like it's a game. They will fake vulnerability just to lure yours out. And if you don't know your emotional landscape, you'll keep being tricked into battles that feel familiar, but were designed to keep you small. The ones who manipulate the best are the ones who listen hardest. They don't raise their voice, they raise their awareness. They notice what you don't say, where your voice cracks, which names make your energy shift. And because you've never asked yourself why certain things shake you, they get to keep shaking you at will. That's not power, that's programming. And the only way to break it is to become so deeply familiar with yourself that no one else gets to define you by the parts you've ignored. Study yourself, not just your personality, but your patterns. Why do you always feel the need to explain yourself when someone accuses you? Why do you stay silent when someone violates your boundaries? Why do you accept certain behaviors and call it love? These are not random choices. They are the result of old programming, emotional debts you've yet to settle. The world is not confused about how to access you. You've just never changed the code. If someone can read you better than you read yourself, they'll always be one step ahead of your peace. You'll keep losing arguments you were never supposed to be in. You'll keep feeling confused about why you're drained after certain conversations. You'll keep letting people in who speak your wounds fluently, but never your worth. But the moment you turn inward, the moment you start asking the hard questions, the moment you start healing not just what was done to you, but what you believed about yourself because of it, that's when things begin to shift. Because when you know yourself, your boundaries sharpen, your standards rise, your energy changes, and suddenly the same people who used to study you now feel blocked. The same ones who knew how to push your buttons now find their hands empty. They can't reach what you've reclaimed. They can't twist what you've already named. Studying yourself isn't just reflection, it's preparation. It's making sure you are not the easiest person to manipulate in the room. It's making sure that when someone tests your limits, they find them firm. When they search for the cracks in your character, they see healing, not holes. This isn't pride, it's preservation. This is how you guard your growth. The people who truly love you will never use your past against you. They will hold your story with care, not control, but those who want power over you will always study what you haven't yet healed. That's why your awareness must go deeper than their curiosity. Your knowledge of self must outweigh their knowledge of your habits. Because if they've studied you more than you've studied yourself, your life will always bend in their direction. You are not just a personality, you are a pattern, a rhythm, a complex creation full of history, hope, and healing. And the deeper you know yourself, the harder it becomes for anyone to interrupt your frequency. The battle is not just to be seen, it's to see yourself so clearly that no one else gets to write your story in ink. You take the pen back, you know the script, and this time you decide how it ends. Peace isn't a pose you strike for applause. It's not a curated moment captured in a filtered photo or a carefully worded status about self-care. Real peace is messy. It's quiet. It's private. And most of the time, it's invisible to anyone who's not doing the work with you. It's not what you show people. It's what you carry within. And the truth is, you don't always look peaceful when you're actually practicing peace. Sometimes you look like you're walking away. Sometimes you look like you're saying no. Sometimes you look like the bad guy in someone else's narrative. And that's fine, because peace isn't for them. It's for you. There's pressure in this world to appear healed, to look unbothered, to seem like nothing shakes you. But that's not peace, that's a performance. That's pretending not to care so no one sees how deeply you do. That's biting your tongue when you're really burning inside. And that's not sustainable, because any peace you have to perform is peace that will eventually betray you. It will crack under pressure, break when tested, and leave you in pieces when you needed it to hold you together. Real peace doesn't demand perfection. It demands consistency. It's not about floating above life's chaos. It's about choosing not to sink when it comes. You practice peace every time you pause before reacting, every time you breathe through the urge to clap back, every time you sit with a feeling instead of throwing it at someone else. That's where the work is. That's the difference between pretending to be calm and becoming calm. And some days that practice will feel like failure. You'll raise your voice, you'll lose your center, you'll fall into old habits and walk away feeling like you've forgotten everything you've learned. But peace isn't about never slipping. It's about shortening the distance between falling and getting back up. It's recognizing the moment you left yourself and making the choice to return again and again and again. Peace is a daily discipline. It's the decision to protect your energy even when you want to prove your point. It's walking away from arguments you know you could win because the cost is too high. It's letting go of people who demand your peace as payment for their presence. And that's hard because the world will always give you reasons to be angry, offended, or reactive. But peace whispers, not this time, not today. When you treat peace as a performance, you start managing people's perception of you instead of mastering your inner world. You start posting quotes you don't live by. You start preaching boundaries you don't enforce. And you start shrinking into silence, not because you've found peace, but because you're afraid of confrontation. But peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the courage to move through it without losing yourself. It's standing in truth with love, not aggression. It's speaking when needed and staying silent when that silence is sacred, not when it's fearful. Your peace doesn't have to make sense to everyone. It won't always be met with applause. Some people will call it distance. Some will call it arrogance. Some will call it a phase. Let them. You didn't come this far to explain your peace to people who benefit from your chaos. You didn't do the work just to go back to proving yourself. You practiced to protect this stillness, to preserve this clarity. And anyone who wants access to you must respect that rhythm. Practicing peace also means being honest with yourself. It means acknowledging when your peace is performative, when you're pretending you've moved on just to avoid feeling, when you're saying, I'm fine, because it's easier than vulnerability. But real peace asks you to tell the truth, even when it hurts, even when it's lonely, even when it costs you relationships that were built on your silence, not your safety. Peace isn't always pretty. Sometimes it's a quiet breakdown in your car. Sometimes it's turning your phone off so you can hear your own thoughts. Sometimes it's therapy, prayer, boundaries, rest, or radical honesty. But one thing it always is, yours. No one can give it to you. No one can sustain it for you. And no one can protect it like you can. So stop performing. You don't owe anyone a perfect picture of healing. You owe yourself the truth. You owe yourself the chance to practice peace until it becomes your reflex, not your costume. Until it becomes your default, not your disguise. Because when peace lives in you, not just around you, that's when you're truly untouchable. That's when you're anchored. And that kind of peace doesn't just protect you, it transforms you. The person who controls your emotions controls your decisions, your direction, your day. That's not just a statement, it's a warning. Because the moment someone knows how to move you emotionally, they don't need chains. They don't need authority. They don't even need truth. All they need is access. Access to the parts of you you've never truly studied. The buttons you've never unplugged, the triggers you've never tamed. They raise their voice and you shrink. They withdraw their attention and you panic. They use silence, guilt, or praise as tools, not to love you, but to maneuver you. And without realizing it, you're being emotionally led. You're not reacting from your values, you're reacting from your wounds. And that's exactly how control works. Not by force, but by familiar patterns. Not by loud demands, but subtle influence. But when you begin to master your emotions, when you stop handing over your peace for free, you break that system, you flip the script, you shift from being predictable to powerful, because now they don't know what to expect from you. You're not reacting the same way you used to. You're not falling for the same traps. You're not rising to every bait. That silence they used to fear, you now use it with precision. That anger they once provoked, you now process it before you speak. That hurt they could count on, you've transformed it into wisdom. Mastery isn't about never feeling. It's about choosing how you respond in spite of what you feel. It's knowing that emotions are messengers, not masters. They are indicators, not dictators. And when you feel something deeply, you don't let it decide the course of your life in that moment. You let it speak, but you don't let it steer, because what you don't manage, others will. If you don't manage your temper, someone will manipulate it. If you don't manage your need for validation, someone will exploit it. If you don't manage your fear of rejection, someone will use it to make you stay, and it won't always look obvious. Control rarely does. Sometimes it's sweet words with sharp motives. Sometimes it's flattery with a hook. Sometimes it's attention that feels like love, but is really surveillance. That's why emotional mastery isn't just maturity, it's protection. It's walking into a room and knowing what energy belongs to you and what energy you will not absorb. It's standing in conflict and not losing your character. It's hearing criticism without crumbling. It's knowing how to say, I feel that, but I'm still choosing how to move. People fear what they cannot control, and once you've mastered your emotions, you become dangerous. Not because you're cruel, but because you're unshakable. You don't chase, you don't plead, you don't over-explain. You move from alignment, not reaction. And that unsettles those who once held power through your instability. This power dynamic isn't just about others, it's also internal. Because sometimes it's not them you're battling, it's the version of you that's used to being reactive, the version that's addicted to defense, that feels worthy only when seen, that seeks revenge instead of release. But with mastery, you start to make decisions for the person you're becoming, not the person you've been. You begin to prioritize peace over proof, growth over ego, purpose over the need to be right. And this doesn't happen overnight. It happens every time you choose to pause before you respond. Every time you name the feeling instead of becoming it. Every time you realize that someone else's chaos doesn't need to become your crisis. Those small choices become the practice. That practice becomes your power. And that power, it shifts everything. Because when your emotions are no longer up for grabs, you stop being an easy target. People may still try you, but they don't find the same reaction. They don't see the same tears. They don't get the satisfaction of pulling you out of character. You've upgraded, you've recalibrated, and they're now dealing with someone who understands their worth too deeply to let a moment of emotion undo a lifetime of growth. When you master your emotions, you don't just gain control over yourself, you reclaim every part of your life that was once ruled by outside influence. You take back your voice, your time, your decisions, your dignity. The game shifts because you shifted. You stopped letting feelings run the show. You started letting wisdom take the lead. And that's how the power dynamic is rewritten. Not with a louder voice, but with a quieter soul. Not with the need to win, but with the strength to walk away. You've mastered yourself, and that is the highest form of power.